My name is Qian Jing. I run the Center for China Analysis here at H Society, but tonight I'm your MC. It is actually my first time to be MC in the United States, and I'm told that it's good to break a joke or two here in the USA. But I have to confess, as a serious China scholar, I don't know much jokes. So I have to come to my daughter, who's 8 years old, but educated in the USA, to come up some jokes for me. So if the joke goes well, all credits goes to Caroline, who's in the room. If it doesn't go well, I take full responsibility. I guess that's how parenthood works. Anyway, here it is. So in the year of 2025, which of the following were jumps higher? Number one, a wet raccoon with a bad hairstyle. You know who I'm talking about. Two, Trump's tariffs against China. Three, Guangdong's youth unemployment rate. Fourth, China's nationalistic sentiment. Fifth, President Xi's popularity rate in South America. Who wants to have a try? The right answer is obvious, is the red raccoon with a bad hairstyle, because the rest simply doesn't jump, if you get the joke. But if we go a little bit deeper, you will understand all of them are interrelated. And that's what we're actually doing at the Center for China Analysis, to provide integrated analyses. And you will read that from the report we're launching today, China 2025. And also you will see and read many of the discussion that is happening tonight. And I'm happy to report the report we have launched has been well received. A lot of media has already covered that, and we have more friends from the press tonight, from the Financial Times, The Economist, Bloomberg, New York Times, South China Post, and a few others. Feel free to cover more. I'm also glad to share that different partners of CCA has already started translating this report into French, Spanish, Italian, and of course Chinese. But I want to also emphasize all of this won't happen without a wonderful team at CCA and Asia Society. I have thanked a lot of people already in the video. There's one group I have intentionally left out I want to thank here in person, is those who have worked behind the scenes. So could I please invite the audience to give a round of applause to the unsung heroes, those who have worked behind the scenes, and all our families who have been quietly supporting us with unconditional love. Thank you all. And speaking of family, CCA could not thrive without the support of H Society family. So in that spirit, with great pleasure, I give you the head of our current family, the global CEO and president, the first female foreign minister of South Korea, Dr. Kyung-wha. Thank you for your support, Kyung-wha. The floor is yours.
Good evening. Well, I don't have a joke, but really delighted to be here to welcome all of you. We're all here to mark the release of China 2025 What to Watch, the flagship report published each year by our Center for China Analysis of the Asia Society Policy Institute. 2025 will be a critical year for China and for the rest of the world. I think that's an understatement. This year's report, as the title indicates, zeroes in on the most important China-related developments to watch in the year ahead. I would like to thank everyone at the ASPI Center for China Analysis for all of their hard work on the report and for organizing this event. I particularly want to thank CCA co-founder and managing director Jing Qian for his leadership of CCA, all CCA fellows and staff gathering here from around the world, as well as the 16 authors of the report. Many thanks also go to all of our speakers appearing on stage tonight. In just 2 years, CCA has grown from only a handful of individuals to a global team of more than 50 staff and fellows spanning 11 countries. It has already established a strong track record as a leading China knowledge hub and an innovative think and do tank on China. Its global family of experts has consistently produced high-quality, independent, and objective analysis with a focus on policy impact and relying extensively on primary Chinese language source material. They have published dozens of policy papers and initiated multiple Track 1.5 dialogues with Chinese government officials, experts, and academics. CCA has also opened new grounds with its interactive websites, Decoding Chinese Politics, Taiwan Policy Database, and Global Public Opinions on China. These help hundreds of thousands of users understand the complexities of Chinese domestic politics, trends in global public opinion on China, and other timely issues of interest to policymakers, China watchers, and the general public. These are uncertain, fluid times, and the coming year will likely be pivotal for China, the United States, and the world. CCA's inside-out approach to independent policy-relevant analysis will be more critical than ever. Our goal tonight is to spark new ideas, inspire informed, respectable debate, and challenge the way many of us think about China. And we have more great things in store in the year ahead, and we are just getting started. Thank you all again for your support for Asia Society and the ASPI Center for China Analysis, and for coming tonight. I know that we are all in for a very enjoyable, informative evening.
Thank you, Kyung-wha, and for your encouraging and very, very inspiring remarks. We are convinced that the mission of CCA is more relevant than ever. The meaningful work of CCA is needed more than ever. And I'm also very glad to report that based on our internal strategy meeting this morning, our work of year 2025 will be more interesting than ever. So stay tuned. And as Kevin has eloquently identified, there are mega trends of our time which will shape our work. From the Trump 2.0 and the implications it will bring us from tech, trade, climate, public health, and global order, to the global realignment around the intensified US-China competition on the issues have just been mentioned, to all the internal changes in China and what will be the implications, giving you a few examples. For example, the generals that are missing in China, what do they mean for Chinese elite politics? What do they mean for Taiwan? Jack Ma is now back. Alibaba is back to the Chinese New Year Gala. What do those mean for Chinese private entrepreneurs? As Kevin mentioned, thousands of Chinese youths are riding bikes in the middle of the evening. What do they mean for Chinese society and state society interactions? And thousands and millions of Chinese with mental health issues, what do they mean for Chinese public health challenges? And I think our 3 panels with 4 spotlight presentations tonight hopefully will shed some light to those questions. But before I turn to our first panel, there's one housekeeping matter I ask to remind you all. We have interactive elements tonight. There's 3 polling questions. We welcome your participation. We also welcome your question to the 3 panels. On the page 2 of the program, there's 2 QR codes. Please scan and participate, and your participation will be rewarded. We have prepared 3 gifts with CCA characteristics. We will have 2 lottery winners tonight. And there's 3 gifts. You can pick 2 out of 3. Gift number 1 is a free dinner tonight with all the authors, okay? It's a free buffet dinner, the best buffet dinner you will ever have at H Society. Right? The second is 2 free hours of questions with CCA experts on anything China-related. I mean, anything China-related. We have, as Kyung-wha said, 51 fellows cover everything China-related. And third is 3 months of free access to all CCA private briefings inside Beijing Beltway, PLA, monitoring, economic analysis, social sentiment, climate updates. So you can pick 2 out of 3 if you are selected. We're going to announce the first lottery winner on the break, and the second one at the end. So please participate. We'll announce that. Okay, now to the first panel, politics, Chinese politics. Politics first is the first principle to understand China. It seems to be the case for South Korea and for the United States now. The politicalization of things and securitization of things now have consequences in China and beyond. It has proliferated to state-society relationship, central-local relationship, civil-military relationship, as well as US-China relationship. Our first panel discussion today, I hope they are going to come to the stage at some point. Are you coming? Will be led by our senior fellow, Susie Jakes, who is also the editor-in-chief of China File, who will help with his first-class panelists to decode Chinese domestic politics. So over to you, Susie.
Thanks. Okay. Good evening. As Jing said, I'm Susie Jakes. I'm the editor of the online magazine China File, but I'm delighted to be here tonight in my capacity as a senior fellow at CCA, a role for which I am eternally grateful to Jing and Kevin for inviting me to take on 2 years ago when we launched. Our topic tonight is China's domestic politics. Our theme, broadly speaking, is Xi Jinping's aspirations for China's future and the ways that his vision tangles and sometimes collides with China's economic, political, and social realities. Our time is quite brief, and my colleagues Neil Thomas, Wu Guoguang, Lynette H, and John Osburg are brimming with insight on many dimensions of this topic, and so we're going to get right into it. But I do want to underline, because I didn't understand this until just before we came on stage, that after we talk, we're going to invite questions from you, but we're not passing microphones. You need to use the QR code that Jing just showed you to submit them, and then they'll appear miraculously on this screen, and I can direct them to my colleagues. So please start submitting questions whenever you're so inspired. Neil, I think I'd like to start with you. You are the co-author of the opening essay in this terrific China 2025 collection. And your essay begins with the line, "What is good for Xi Jinping is not always good for China." And I thought that statement, sure to be somewhat provocative to our comrades in Beijing, might be a good place to start tonight. So explain yourself.
Yes, thank you. What is good for Xi Jinping is not always good for China, maybe sometimes. But we see in October 2022, Xi Jinping cemented his personal dominance at the 20th Party Congress, achieving maybe the greatest political victory at a party congress in the post-Mao era. But since October 2022, China has had a very difficult post-COVID recovery, marked by pessimism in Chinese society, marked by fiscal strain in local governments, increasing skepticism about the centre's policymaking abilities, and especially now, the rising chance of hostility in US-China relations. And so the point that me and my co-author, Lobsang Tsering, make in our contribution to China 2025 is that next year we could see an increasing disconnect between Xi's strong grip on elite politics in Beijing, in my view, and his relatively weaker ability to actually deliver governance outcomes on the ground. And this disconnect is important because it will lead to greater policy volatility, more economic uncertainty, and perhaps also greater social instability in China. And the context for this is that Xi seems to believe that his current policy agenda is right for China. I mean, he wants to move the economy away from rapid debt-fueled growth driven by real estate to a more high-quality development, in his words, that balances growth with social welfare, economic equality concerns, and technological self-reliance especially. which all sounds good, but he's also convinced that in order to do this, the party needs to play a stronger role in telling capitalists, and most companies what to do. And that's why he stuck to his guns at the third plenum in July on these domestic and economic policy issues. That's why it was fairly poorly received by the international and also many parts of the domestic business community. It's something where occasion where he explicitly dismissed the concerns many people have about weak consumption and rising trade frictions as, quote, problems of transition to his, economic vision. But he also seems convinced that the problems and issues facing China at the moment are less the result of his policies and more the result of poor implementation of his policies by his cadres, which is leading him to, in my view, do more damage by tightening party discipline and ideological control even further. And so, if we look to yesterday's Politburo meeting, we obviously have signs that next year we will see more monetary and fiscal policy stimulus, which is a good thing. But in my view, these policies are not designed to negate Xi's agenda. They're designed to stabilize the economy in the short term in order to focus on Xi's existing policies in the longer term. And so if we look to 2025 and what's coming down the road, I think the most likely course is perhaps that Xi doubles down on political control, economic statism, national security. But we do have to bear in mind that Xi's a bit more complex than the caricature we sometimes make of him. And he's shown with the end of zero COVID, recent relaxation of some economic policies, private tutoring policies, which he was very personally identified with, that he can show some flexibility ideologically, even some pragmatism when it comes to his own political interests in avoiding major economic and social risks. So it's not traffic in all one direction, but it's probably still more in that direction. But the best case scenario is that he does expend a lot of his political capital next year to maybe shift gears by expanding on the hints we have in the third plenum about fiscal reforms, hukou reforms, private sector participation. So that'd be my best case scenario. And the key watch point next year is the instructions that Xi will give for drafting the 15th five-year plan, which will cover 2026 to 2030. They should come at a plenum of the CCP Central Committee, which will happen sometime in 2025. She's been very dodgy on actually going by the fixed calendar of Chinese politics. So we don't know when, but definitely sometime next year. So stay tuned for more CCA analysis on that.
Great. I think that's actually a perfect place for Guoguang, for you to jump in. As you write in your recent paper in this great collection, one of the ways, and as Neil just said, one of the ways that Xi is trying to bridge this disconnect between his power and his ability to deliver governance outcomes is through tightening control over the governing elite. And this is happening against a backdrop of large numbers of retirements of cadres who are aging out, purges, which you've also written about extensively in a paper that I'm excited we're going to be publishing in ChinaFile quite soon. And then there's going to be the appointment of this whole new generation of leaders born in the 1970s, so young like me. What can we expect from this process, and what kinds of challenges does Xi face in terms of getting party leaders to implement his vision?
Yeah, would like to follow my colleague, Neil Thomas, to emphasize actually Xi Jinping's concentration of power to control particularly parties to the elites and to discipline them, to actually tightly, request him for their loyalty. But at the same time, that kind of measures reduce, parties' elites' autonomy in governance, initiative in policy implementation, and also to reduce their personal interest. Before they could get personal, benefit from power, money exchange relationships. So all those opportunities were reduced. So this is major challenge, I think, not only in next year for the party leadership and for Xi Jinping, and even actively in the past several years, and also in years beyond 2025. So those guys, I mean, party state cadres, their incentives, that's really major, challenge to Xi Jinping. And in 2025, a major reshuffling of provincial party state cadres will take place. Basically because about 1/5, deputy provincial level cadres, particularly provincial party standing committee members, would be replaced. So why this would happen? Basically, it's due to something I call institutional inconsistency regarding retirement age. So normally we know that there is a norm governing cadre retirement. So for those cadres at deputy provincial level and below, their normal retirement age is 60 years old. But this active policy is implemented based on individual case. When one cadre reaches 60 years old, exactly in that month, he or she would be retired, actively managed by party organization department. On the other side, the CCP system has some democratic elements appearing formalistic democratic elements. That means there are elections, regular elections. There are terms of office. So for those provincial standing committee members, so when you have elections, so how to determine their age, ceiling. So basically, when you reach 57, okay, you could continue your term. So that means you could be elected. But if you reach 58, normally you will not be be asked to retire. But at that year of election, you have to retire because you reach 58. You can't stay at office for another 5 years. So this institutional inconsistency makes problem for the party, cadre management. So last time, the election of a standing committee member of a committee of provincial actively took place 3 years ago. So that means those who were elected to the party standing committee when they were at 57 years old. So in 2025, they will reach 60 years old. So they have to retire the next year. So that's why in the next year, about 50 members nationwide among less than 300 members of provincial party standing committee, they will retire. So there could be large-scale reshuffle of provincial leaders, at least the largest one before the next party congress, National Party Congress, which will take place in 2027.
And is the significance of that you think, well, what is the significance in terms of policy implementation? I mean, of having so many new people. Are they going to be more flexible, more pliable to the central leadership's desires, or less so?
Really good question, Susie. I think, so when the vacancies, come out, so some new cadres will be promoted. And under Xi Jinping, it seems that, competition for those kind of positions become even more intense than before because norms are not so normal as before. So you need to find your connection, you need to gain, Xi Jinping's attention, a lot of things. So when you need to compete for those new positions, so I guess those party cadres, they will try to do two things. First, you need to show your loyalty to Xi Jinping and the party leadership. But at the same time, who actively does want to show, less loyalty to Xi Jinping? Nobody, actually. So everybody tried to show their loyalties, so how Xi Jinping can choose among them. So at the same time, you need to show your capability in promoting economic development, in delivering better governance. But Xi Jinping's policies in general are contradictory with promoting economic development and to actively better governance. So you need to find actively a very narrow way between the two contradicting things. So show your loyalty to Xi Jinping, but still, with Xi Jinping's framework, you can promote economic development. So who can do that? Let's see who can do that in the next year, who would be promoted.
Very interesting. I want to shift now a little away from the leaders to the people that they lead with some questions for the two of you. John, another area of Xi Jinping's efforts at the moment is focused on inculcating party ideology, especially at a time when the lingering fallout of the handling of COVID-19, particularly the lockdowns, the breakdown of trust that came out of that, the kind of frustration. We were talking about this earlier especially with the most local levels of government, the economic slowdown, high youth unemployment, all seem to be contributing to this sense of widespread malaise, alienation, and alienation from precisely the kind of abject fealty that Xi Jinping seems to want to promote. So in your research, how have you seen this dynamic playing out?
Right, so I think, thanks, Susan. So I think one of the trends that you saw under Xi that was a sort of a departure from the reform era norm was this attempt to kind of micromanage what people believe in a way. And one manifestation of that was the Study the Great Nation app, Shui Xi Qiangguo, that was a required study for government officials and other state employees. You also, in the realm of religion, which has really been the focus of my recent research, you see this campaign, the sinification of religion. And you see, I think, Beijing under Xi sort of views religion as a vehicle for dissemination of ideals and loyalty to the party. And this is also a kind of departure from the first couple of decades of the reform era. And my sense in studying forms of religion among the middle class over the past decade or so is that these efforts have backfired and that people sort of see them as very ham-fisted attempts to sort of engineer a certain set of beliefs. And in fact, what I've seen among some of the middle class people that I've done research with is that they've been attracted to religious traditions they perceive to be at the margins of state control. So in the past, I think from the mid-90s up into the present, the sort of two forms of religious practice that have seen the most explosive growth in urban areas, at least, are Protestant Christianity, and in particular unofficial forms of it, but also something I've specifically been working on is Tibetan Buddhism. And the reason that I argue that the urban middle class has been drawn to Tibetan Buddhism is they see it as sort of untainted in a way by party control, by commercialization, which they see as having had a corrupted influence on Chinese temples. And so just to bring it back to the sort of post-COVID moment, I mean, I think the economic downturn, the sort of struggles that people are facing, their children finding work, their businesses failing, these are also driving people towards religion, and it's driving people towards forms of religion that I think they perceive as sort of less under the sort of influence of the party state.
Really interesting. Lynette, you've recently been looking into another result of people's disaffection at the moment, which is Chinese citizens just deciding to pack up and leave China, runism, as it's sometimes called. Talk a little bit about that. How big a phenomenon is that, and do you expect that to continue to increase? What would turn it back around in the other direction? It must be quite worrying to leadership.
So I think, post-COVID, there are two types of people that are leaving China. One is the very wealthy as well as the middle class. Those people who have got the money and have the capacity to leave and have the talent will bring their talent and their wealth overseas to New York, to Toronto, to London, to Singapore, and to Tokyo, among the most popular destinations. And they have got all sorts of creative ways because of capital control in China. They use all sorts of creative ways, including funneling money through drug trade in the United States to bring their money out in order to avert the measures imposed by capital control. But there's another type of people who are leaving China, which is, there's always been there, but there has been a spike, I think, and a spike of 3 times the number of people post-COVID, is the number of people who came through to the United States and more recently to Europe and entering through, so they would fly from, let's say, Thailand or Turkey or Hong Kong to Ecuador, which used to allow Chinese people to enter the country visa-free, and then they'll walk all the way through the Panama, the Darien Gap, and through Mexico and to enter either the United States, either through Texas or California. So the illegal route, the Zhouxian people, there has been a spike. And recently, Ecuador say, the Chinese people cannot enter our country anymore visa-free. But these people with their snakeheads have all sorts of ways to avert that. Could went in through third country. I have been told by people who have recently done that. And I think this is kind of the wider phenomenon of people who are increasingly dissatisfied with the regime. I think if you are dissatisfied, you are not happy with the regime, it could manifest in a number of ways. One is exit. If you have the capacity, you could just exit the system. But before exit, people who are unhappy would typically want to make their voice known. That might take the form of petition, protest. But as we know, in China, protest is illegal and it actually could invite trouble, right? So protest is inherently risky. You want to protest, you want to calculate the benefit and cost. You might get fired, you might invite trouble to your family members. So protest, voice, exit, and the other type, Kevin mentioned earlier, the discourse of tangping, lying flat. So China is used for a long time for its 996 culture. People work from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. 6 days a week. For as long as I've studied China, people have been so hardworking for its 996 culture. That is changing too. So the Department of Statistics in China actually had some statistics collected recently to register the number of people, the number of hours that people actually work. That has shown a small decline. So it's not just a discourse anymore. People actually are putting in less hours into their work. Why? Because they see that tomorrow's future is actually not brighter than today. So why should I work so hard? So what do all these means among the for the investors and policymakers sitting among us? You might be wondering what this implies. I think this implies a couple of things. China is the second superpower. It's an increasingly unstable society. But don't get me wrong, we are not going to see what happened in Syria with the Assad regime happening in China anytime soon. I'm not implying that at all. But I think what it means is that it's increasingly easy to tip the scale. China used to be a very stable society. Yes, there's kind of pockets of protest here and there, and people could come up with all sorts of statistics, but relatively stable. And the repressive apparatus, the government repressive system, the Weiwen system, has been really doing an excellent job in preempting and preventing people from conducting collective action, from stopping a group of people going out there to protest. Before you could plot that sort of things, the government could actually stop you. But more recently, people have been doing all sorts of creative things like mass cycling. Is it a protest? maybe it's not really a protest, but it's a way of expressing your dissatisfaction or your grievance in a creative way, or a string of violent incidents, which is a lone wolf type of incident, which is the system cannot actually preempt that because it's way too costly. And I think this is something to watch, the increasing signs of instability in China.
Well, I think we may only have a couple minutes left, and we got a great collection of questions from all of you. Nobody in this audience is lying flat. But I have to just pick one, which is very hard. But I think it's going to be this one, and maybe we don't have time for each of you to answer it. Somebody's just going to have to jump in. Here's the question. As China faces mounting economic pressures, including slowing growth and demographic challenges, how do you see the Chinese Communist Party balancing its need for political control with the imperative for economic performance? This is Kevin's question. But here's the tricky part. Are there specific trade-offs you foresee becoming unavoidable in 2025?
I think, people in the field, I've got students in the field interviewing local officials. Already they are showing that the government used to prioritize economic growth above everything else. That's how usually officials are evaluated. But these days, it is not. It is about party loyalty. It is about social stability, trumping economic growth. So there's clearly a trade-off, and I think Xi Jinping, through the institutional channels, is sending a signal that we are willing to deprioritize economic growth, and we are going to prioritize social stability and loyalty to the party.
Anybody else want to jump in?
She's been very explicit that he's happy to tolerate lower growth in service of these other social and political and international goals that he has. I mean, it's a mistake to say that growth isn't important. It clearly is something, but it's gone from a question of how do we maximize growth to how do we ensure a baseline of growth that we need to, realize national rejuvenation and, propel everything else. But it's gone from that maximization to maintaining a baseline, which is a big shift compared to earlier years.
Well, I'm sorry we have to stop there, but this is also a perfect entree for our colleagues who are about to come up for a panel about China's economy. So please join me in thanking my panelists and welcoming the next panel.